Hello, aviators, and welcome back. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Nathaniel, I think you're right. That has strong SNL vibes, that music leading into this show. Thanks for joining us again on the live. I have a very special guest tonight. I would like to welcome RH from the podcast Opposing Bases. RH is an air traffic controller who works in both TRACON and air traffic control towers. His podcast, along with his partner AG, is all about air traffic control issues. If you guys haven't checked that out, you should definitely do so. And tonight we're going to go through some questions and also do a little lightning round here with RH. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Jason. It's great to be back.
Yeah, it's always good to have you on.
It's been a while.
Always thought, yeah, and I've always thought I've probably said this to you before, but there's not a great dialogue, or hasn't been traditionally, between pilots and controllers. So I think it's particularly important that you are here answering questions.
Yeah. So just a reminder, we're both pilots and we're both controllers. So that's kind of our way into the audience and understanding it from both sides of the microphone. That's, I think, what makes the show unique. So
yeah, thank you for that. And I understand that all of your comments and positions are official FAA policy. Is that right?
the opposite. Official. Thank you.
Just joking. For anyone that didn't catch that sarcasm, RH's opinions, I think, are his own and not those of the organization FAA.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, awesome. So you guys gave me some questions on Instagram. Of course, we have the comments up here. So if you think of questions or there's anything you want us to address specifically, we will do so. But I am going to kind of go through some of the stuff that people gave us ahead of time, just to start. The first one was, somebody wanted to know if there's an official definition for short final versus final. That may not be an air traffic control question either, by the way. So if you don't know, it's fine too.
I don't know that you'll find an official one. It depends on the context, I think, that we're talking about it in. Are we doing pattern work and we want somebody to do a short approach? Or are we having them report on final versus if they're on short final? We should know about that by now. It depends on the context and how it's used, I think.
I was thinking that too. I thought ground speed would have a lot, like, part of it, right? I mean, if you're a 737 and you're on a 1 mile final, that's short final. But if you're a Piper Cub,
yeah, that's a normal final, right? Normal pattern.
Yeah,
that makes sense. Yeah, I think it depends on the airplane, the context, and the airspace that you're operating in and what you're actually doing.
Right. Excellent. That's kind of what I thought too. The next question was, when we get a phone number, so like when you guys give us a phone number and say, call this number, the person wants to know, does that always mean that we're going to hear from the FAA?
I don't think it always means anything. It may just mean they want to have a conversation.
Yeah.
It may not mean anything negative. We have a script. We have to say a possible pilot deviation, and you can go into the book on why we have to say that. It's really preparing the pilot to write down information that they remember, so that if there is a conversation or some follow-up later on, they can reference those notes and remember what happened. But no, it does not necessarily mean something bad's going to happen. It doesn't mean you're ever going to hear from us. And it doesn't mean someone's sitting by the phone for days on end waiting for you to call. Yeah, I'll leave that one there.
All right. Well, and I can add a couple things. Like, I think what you just said, a lot of people don't know. So the keyword that you're looking for, if you think it's your violation, right? You're a pilot, you did something out there, you're going to hear the words possible pilot deviation before the phone number. So ATC will start that communication as possible pilot deviation. I have a phone number, advise ready to copy. So if you hear that, then you know that the reason you're getting that phone number is for a possible deviation. However, I also believe, and I'm just going to throw this out there and leave it, giving you that phone number is not an ATC directive to call them. So if anyone's out there wondering, do I have to now call that phone number because there's a law that says I have to do what ATC tells me to do? Not in that context. If ATC says turn right heading 050, you have to do that. That's a directive. But if they say possible pilot deviation, here's a phone number, advise ready to copy, you can write that down. It's up to you and your lawyers whether or not you actually want to call them.
That's a fair summary of that. I think legal advice may say, hold on. I'm not sure all legal advice is going to say don't call. The conversation may go in a direction you don't want it to go and feel like you need to have more preparation or some help on that phone call. That's a different story. But You're right. It's not the same as an air traffic instruction.
Yeah, yeah. And I do, just to kind of give the funny story for people to remember, that there is one person I know that didn't call, and Tower didn't say that. They didn't say possible pilot deviation. They just said, hey, I got a phone number. Will you call this when you land or whatever? The guy got freaked out. He didn't call. He thought he was in trouble, whatever. All they wanted to do was invite him up to the cab. They needed like a special thing they wanted to offer him, but it was really just like one human being saying, hey, give me a ring when you land, you know?
Yep.
And the guy ran away from the airport with his tail between his legs.
Well, it might be wise for them to let them know, hey, you didn't do anything wrong. If I want them to call and I want an actual conversation to occur, but I don't want them to feel upset or scared that they did something wrong, I'll preface it with, you didn't do anything wrong. I would like to talk to you.
Yeah.
Here's the number to call. And it'll probably be a number that is not recorded that we can have a conversation on.
Right, right. And there's a lot to kind of unpack in this one, so I'm just going to kind of keep exploring it.
Sure.
But that advice about, you know, the fact that you don't have to call, in quotes, is a real judgment, because what your lawyer would tell you is, if you choose to call in the pilot deviation circumstance, anything you say can incriminate you, right? So this is where it gets a little tricky. It's like, you don't exactly want to call with a team of lawyers and say, I can't talk to my attorneys, right? That's possibly going to escalate things. But this is kind of what I wanted to ask you about, RH, is the FAA has something called a compliance philosophy, apparently, these days, right? And the idea is, from what I understand, not being in the FAA, that if a pilot does something wrong or dangerous even, the FAA's first attempt is going to be to try to like remediate the pilot, get them back on the right track, not be so punitive, be more inclusive and educational, and all of that. So I guess my first question for you is that a real policy that you guys discuss, or is that just what we teach other instructors?
On the air traffic level, working airplanes day to day, we don't necessarily work in that realm. We have the same sort of reporting philosophy, though. If we make a mistake, the idea is to identify the mistake, identify an issue that may exist, and correct it, you know, enhancing safety. And the compliance philosophy of trying to fix unintentional, that's a key part of that, is unintentional errors or mistakes that a pilot may have made, instead of assuming that they're going to go after enforcement action or taking a certificate for a certain amount of time. Maybe everybody doesn't win in that scenario. If you want to educate the pilot and find a safe solution, you can do that without enforcement. I think that's the overlying goal of the agency. At least on an air traffic side, it's treated the same way. We can self-report when we did something incorrect. If we misapplied the rules, we can say we did it. And the goal of that program is to identify trends in the NAS and fix them, not to come after me as a controller for messing something up.
Yeah. And I think so knowing that, right, like that's a real thing. We hear about it on our side. It's part of the flight instructor renewal courses that I teach, trying to get that message out there. So based on that, like one time I did get I pulled off the runway. Tower says to me, possible pilot deviation. I have a phone number advised ready to copy. And I copied the number, and I knew exactly what it was about. I think often pilots, you guys will know when you're out there flying, like something happened, right? It's usually not coming out of nowhere. So when they said possible pilot deviation, I was like, oh, that thing.
Oh, that thing. They did see that.
Yeah, they saw that. So, I made sure I knew about the compliance philosophy. I tied up the airplane. I calmed myself down. I made sure I was in the correct mindset. And I'm saying this mostly for the folks that are listening. I think you may have heard the story, but I call the number and I say, hey, I'm the pilot of that aircraft. And I really took like a non-combative approach. I tried to really leverage the compliance philosophy mentality. I let the air traffic controller yell at me, explain to me why it was dangerous, explain to me where they were coming from. And all I said was, thank you for the remediation. Like, I promise that won't happen again. Like, I just fed him the thing that I thought he might want to hear. And I wasn't combative and I didn't fight, and I took it on the chin and it died. It didn't get escalated. So my question for you is it out of your hands at that point? I mean, mine was a really minor thing, but let's use an example that wasn't me. Let's say somebody does something wrong. I don't know. They land without a clearance. They're in the pattern 7 times. On the 8th time they land, and you guys both realize, I don't think I ever said clear to land the 8th time, right? It's a thing, right? And let's say you don't like this guy, so you say possible pilot deviation or whatever it is. Once you say those words, is there a protocol that's out of your hands, or do you still have the ability to quell it if that guy calls you and says, look, I'm so sorry,
So
whatever?
typically that would trigger some sort of report that's going to go outside the building.
Okay.
So yes, it is out of our hands at that point. But the conversation that you're originally going to have with air traffic, that number you give you, is the start of maybe something that'll end. If it goes any further, it's not going to be from us. It's going to be from outside the building from a FSDO. They would be the ones following up. And typically the information we're gathering from that phone call, name, how can we get in touch with you when the FSDO, if they want to get in touch with you, how do they do that? Hey, did you hear us say this? No. Oh, okay. That's going in that report that leaves the building. And at that point, it is out of our hands. We're not the judge and jury on that. We're just letting you know. And then you have a chance to give us what little information we need. And then someone outside the building takes care of the rest.
Got it. Is that ever used by ATC? Like, the word is possible pilot deviation. So let's say I'm ATC, and like, because what I heard you say is certain things are just going to trigger reports, right? You land without a clearance, it's a runway incursion, or you hit something around, whatever, it's going to go right out of the building.
Right.
Are there ever times you say possible deviation, basically knowing it's not going to go out of the building, but you want that pilot's attention because you want like, did that guy say that to me maybe just because he wanted to offload all that yelling at me and teaching
No,
me?
I don't think anybody really wants to have to say that.
Right. No, but I mean, to teach me or whatever,
I think if you hear those words on the frequency, someone else was told, hey, you got to let them know.
Yeah.
I don't know any controllers that want to sit down, and if we wanted to look for things that were wrong, there's mistakes made every day.
Right.
But we don't throw that out casually. Typically, it's a result of something happened. There's a notice, for example, the example you gave of landing on the 8th time without a clearance is probably wouldn't even strike as something that most people would even notice. But
Sure.
let's say you had an altitude deviation that caused a resolution advisory for an airliner.
Yeah.
They have reports. That's going to trigger reports on somebody else's end. All right, what happened? All we're doing is matching up with someone else's information and trying to identify how did this happen. So we don't want to say those words, but if there was an obvious deviation and that's what caused the RA in this example, then we have to say it. Hey, write it down. You know what? I heard you say 7,000. You said 8. I went right through 8. Okay. Now we know what happened.
Yeah. And I think that's the beauty of the compliance philosophy, just to wrap this up and move on, is it's just nice when everybody's in the spirit of, the community doing better and being safer, and not, give me your certificate and cutting that up and you can't be a pilot, but,
100%.
rather let's learn. Yeah. So, and then before we leave that topic too, in the comments, somebody said, mentioned the NASA report, the ASRS report. If there's any viewers or listeners that don't know what that is, the Aviation Safety Reporting System, commonly known as the NASA report. Some people call it a get out of jail free card. I'd be really careful with that. It's not exactly that, but if it's a benign sort of deviation, you didn't do it intentionally, and you're willing to share the story for the benefit of the community, they can't enforce on it. That doesn't mean you can land on the White House lawn. I'm just saying.
Yeah, that probably won't work then.
No. Awesome. All right. Well, we got a couple more questions, and then I want to do my lightning round of ATC annoying things. So, all right. So the other question was cold calls first or not? Do you know what? And you're a pilot. You know what they mean by cold.
So I think we've answered this a few times on the show, and it depends on the context, what airspace you're in, who you're calling, and what you're trying to do. If you're talking to a center or a TRACON looking for flight following, and it's a busy radar environment, that one first call where you say your life story all at once, probably not going to go over well. It's either going to be ignored or followed up with, I heard the call sign, stand by, I'll get back to you. And you're going to have to repeat it anyway. So in that situation, if it's busy and you're looking for flight following, introduce yourself, wait to be called back. The controller has a chance to write it down or start typing it in, and then take up that valuable frequency time when they have a minute. If you're going to a Delta airport and you're landing, and that's what they deal with all days, inbounds and outbounds, in my experience, they want all of it at once. November 345, 12 miles north, Skyhawk, full stop. Took me 2 seconds to say it. They are prepared, and that's what they're doing, is waiting for those calls in that example. They're not waiting. You don't want a life story. They want it all at once instead of, all right, let's pull it out of you one by one. November 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Go ahead. So I think it depends on the airspace and what you're trying to do, but those I think are pretty safe examples based on my experience in the NAS of when it's appropriate to say it all at once versus saying hello first, introduce yourself before you throw up all the words out.
Yeah, I know that's that's so true. And I think like the call that you just demoed right there is so efficient. And one of the things I like to work on in my radio work, because it's not the most exciting thing to work on radio work, but one thing we all can work on, I think, is just getting more efficient. And often I think, like you did, people can pack a lot of information into a very short thing. 236 Sierra Papa, 2 miles west, Juliet Landing. You know, it's that fast. I mean, it's almost as fast as, you know, San Carlos Tower, 236 Sierra Papa VFR request, right? It's about the same length. And I think also people have to remember that the towers, they know what the ATIS is. So like some of that data is like meaningless. They heard 236 Sierra Pop East Landing or whatever, you know, so it sounds like a lot to us, but if you've been doing it all day.
So on the center and the radar environments, we're looking for flight following. After you've said hello, who you are, and they call you back, tell them where you are, where you're going, what aircraft you're flying, and what altitude, and unkey. That's the order we type it into the keyboard. The keyboard is archaic. If we make a mistake, we have to hit the whole thing and basically delete it all. But that order helps us a ton, and we address that over and over on the show. And I know that's a point of contention. Students push the button and they start thinking, and we get it. But before you're ready to talk, you can practice that. Who are you? All right, we called you back. Where are you? Where are you going? What are you flying? What altitude? Unkey. We can type it in that order and issue you a code.
Who you are, where you're going, what you're flying, and at what altitude.
Yep.
Nice. Excellent. All right. Yeah, and this last comment, Christy, I'm not sure I'm totally following you, but just to reiterate what RH said, I think just in general, understanding the ecosystem, like when you tune in a frequency, listen to what's going on there. Is it quiet? Is nobody talking? And if no one's talking, then it's stupid to say 236 Sierra Papa VFR request.
Yep.
It's like, okay, say your request, right? No one's talking. But if there's a lot of banter, then you want to get that real efficient call in there, and maybe just say VFR request and throw it to the controller so they can come back when they can.
I don't know. Even if it's super quiet, sometimes saying all that really quickly for flight following, they weren't ready to start typing that in. They may have been pushed back looking at something else on another computer screen, and all that. They got the call sign and they can respond to you. But when it comes to preparing to type that in, I'll repeat it. In a radar environment, looking for flight following, that first call, saying who you are and waiting for them to call you back is key.
I see. All right. Got it. So cold call, yes, even if it's quiet. That's why I love these conversations. All right. Are we ready to do the lightning round of annoying ATC?
Sure.
Annoying ATC.
I'll try to stay positive.
Right.
This is for fun. Not everything annoys me, but I'll play along.
All right. So I couldn't think of too many of these, but the game is going to be your first reaction is going to be annoying, not annoying, or I don't really care.
Okay.
You can say it too, but you know.
Okay. Annoying, not annoying. No, annoying, not annoying. I don't care.
And I don't care. You could just say it. Okay. I actually had the hand symbols for you and AG because I thought you guys are both going to. All right. I call you and I say, approach Cessna Fife Tree Flower Fife Tree. With request. Annoying. Thank you.
I know what I'm supposed to say, but
thank you, because I fully agree with you. I just wanted to see if that was a thing. Got him on the fish finder.
It doesn't bother me, because I know what they're saying, but that doesn't help us.
Right.
It doesn't help us. Sorry. I'll try to be faster. My annoying, not annoying.
No, that's all right. That one had a neutral. I was surprised about that, but that had a neutral. Yet Fife Tree Flower Fife Tree was annoying. Right.
Very.
All right. Approach 236 Sierra Papa with you.
Again, neutral on that. I think it's a filler of time, and there's a tendency to want to say something after your call sign. So you can check in level, November 345 climbing, November 345 descending.
Mhm.
If you're level, you can use the word level. Don't feel like you have to say with you. We know you're with us. We hear you.
All right. Approach 236 Sierra Papa 7.5 descending 5.5.
Not annoying.
I don't know what I meant with this last one, but okay, so let's imagine we're being let's see, the fix in this case is my toe. I think you're gonna like this. I think I was just seeing if a super efficient call was annoying, but it's approach 236 Sierra Papa Cessna 172 slant golf, my toe hotel landing.
Not annoying. That's good.
Assuming you were ready for it.
Yep. Well, that call will be perfect for a Delta Tower. We're not in a Delta Tower, so the tower controller doesn't work that VFR arrival in. But in a Tersa or a Class Delta, where they're going to talk to you from the practice area or the VFR checkpoint you're calling in over,
Mhm.
that call is perfectly fine. The slant golf, I would call that unnecessary if you're landing at a Delta. The equipment suffix is added information that they don't need.
Yeah, but so I knew that. I kind of wrote that call as an initial call to a Charlie. Like if I was
Okay.
15 miles out of Oakland, that would be my initial call to the Tracon to get the flight following into Oakland.
So we do not put in an equipment code when we put you into the NAS initially. Now,
Okay.
if later on we want to add some extra information to your flight plan to pass you on, we can change your equipment code. That really raises a good question. I think the default is slant alpha, although that might have changed to slant golf because it's so common in the NAS. But
Yeah.
that initial piece of information may come as a block to the controller. And what did they just say? We're not waiting for that piece of information at that point. We can
Mhm.
add that later, but not necessarily in the initial call.
Got it. Well, those are all the ones that I could think of. If you guys think of any more in the comments here, let me know. I was gonna ask RH one more question that was just on my mind, and I just completely forgot what it was. Oh, do you still encounter, or do you ever encounter aircraft in the NAS that don't have RNAV capability, that can't fly to waypoints? And is that annoying these days?
It is not as common, I would say less than 1% that go through our airspace or slant alpha or slant something that isn't GPS.
Right.
And I don't want to assume that a lot of people are flying maybe with non-installed equipment, but we are not having difficulty give direct fixes. It's not a thing. And we don't use a ton of Victor Airways in our airspace. I know they're far more prevalent out on the West Coast.
Mhm.
And tech routes that heavily use Victor Airways, but no, we've had no issues giving direct fixes. It's so common, even in older fleets, they've been retrofitted with some sort of GPS.
And what would it mean to you if someone just said unable direct? Like I have no RNF capability. Or you
Uh,
just give a vector when you're talking together, that kind of thing.
yeah, head them in that direction. Find out. All right, because VORs are slowly disappearing, right? Well, probably
Mhm.
quicker than they were in the past. So
Yeah.
it's all right. What can we get you direct to? We can put you on a radio. We can find a Victor Airway. We'd have to dig out a map to think about that though in our airspace. We just don't use them that often.
Mhm.
But we can put you on a Victor Airway. Go old
Yeah.
school.
Yeah. Okay. Just something we have to work out with you.
Yeah, not a big deal.
Cool. All right. Well, Nathan came up with one more sort of annoying thing. Can you see that in the comments there? He said, "What about pilots adding 4 to the readback, like cleared to land for 05 whiskey?"
Yeah.
That's so common. It's probably you don't even hear it anymore, do you?
I don't feel like I hear that added word a lot. It doesn't trigger any memory of that. And mm, it may happen in certain airspace, but I don't recall that happening enough to trigger any sort of upset attitude about it.
Yeah. It's interesting though, Nathan. Like, when I talk about working on my radio comms, trying to get more efficient or whatever, that's a error I catch myself making all the time that I would rib my students about. Where I can't think of an example. 236 Sierra Papa 7,500 descending for 5,500 or whatever. I put that little 4 in there that didn't need to be there. Right? It's one of those things you can try to get those words out, not just in for my airplane, but anytime it comes up.
Yeah, so it depends on the level of the student too. I mean, a private pilot, you're gonna have a harder time getting big picture things memorized and understood and the concept of everything. So you have to be careful, kind of the nitpicky. But an instrument student who's experience in the airplane and should be held to a higher standard in terms of phraseology, stick to it. I like it. Tell them to remove those words that can be confusing. We need to hear the correct altitudes, and numbers are important.
Yeah. And Sam, I think the same thing about that next comment, but it's kind of like what RH just said is, I think there's a perfect, like what we're all trying to get to is like this perfect pace that's not too fast and not too slow with all the inefficiencies cut out of it. Just like that example call you made, 236 Sierra Papa, 4 miles west, Juliet landing. That's it. And you can say that even a little slower than you might if you were packing a bunch more words in there. I think that's what we're all going for. Last one. I didn't think I had one more, but is it runway 05 or runway 5? That's a good question, actually.
That might be a local thing with certain airports. We do not hear 05, and we have a 5. We have a single digit runway.
Runway 5.
And we hear 5. We do not hear the 0.
I don't usually hear it either because I'm thinking of runway 2 or runway 20. It's usually not included before.
Yeah, I don't think that's an appropriate use of the phraseology to put the 0 in front of it. But you know how pilots are. If somebody gets annoyed by something, someone's going to keep doing it.
Right.
Over and over.
Well, we're all going to go study the AIM after this call. Anyway, RH, we're out of time, but thank you so much for being here again. It's a pleasure to have you on as always.
Thanks for having us. If there's a big message we can give is don't be afraid to call ATC and be engaged in that.
Awesome. Beautiful. Thank you all for being here. We'll see you next month. We are going to be doing top 5 things all pilots should know. We'll see you there.